Stalin, a name that echoes through the halls of history like an echo of fear, pain, and contradiction. For some, he was the savior who raised the Soviet Union and defeated Nazism. For others, a monster who exterminated his own people without mercy. A leader who called himself the father of the peoples, when in reality he was the architect of a regime based on terror. During his reign, millions of people were murdered, imprisoned, or sent to forced labor camps. Entire families disappeared, towns were condemned to starvation, and an atmosphere of paranoia gripped every corner of the Soviet Empire. And yet, at the same time, Stalin became an idol. He was acclaimed as Hitler's great victor, the symbol of victory in World War II. How is this paradox explained? How did a man capable of causing so much pain end up being glorified as a hero? Today, we will trace his history, strip bare his secrets, and discover the real price of his power. And before we begin, I invite you to do something very simple. If these kinds of stories captivate you as much as they do me, subscribe to the channel and leave a like. Because what you are about to hear is not just history. It is a warning about how far human ambition can go when disguised as salvation. Chapter 1. Glorification in Red Square. It is June 1945. World War II is over. Moscow's Red Square is dressed for a celebration with the victory parade. The Red Army marches with a steady pace, waving captured enemy flags, and cannons rumble, celebrating the end of Nazism. There, on the Kremlin tribune, Stalin is displayed as a living idol. Crowds cheer him, pointing to him as the man who defeated Hitler. Propaganda portrays him as an indestructible giant, the invincible generalissimo. But what few dare to remember at that moment is that the same man receiving praise had instituted one of the deadliest regimes in history. The applause concealed an ocean of blood. The irony is brutal. The glorified savior is, at the same time, the butcher of his people. Chapter 2. From poor boy to master of the Kremlin. Stalin was not born Stalin. His real name was Iosif Vissarionovich Jugashvili. He was born in 1878 in Gori, Georgia, into a humble family marked by violence. His father, an alcoholic shoemaker, frequently beat him. His mother, deeply religious, dreamed of him becoming a priest. But life had other plans. Stalin studied in an Orthodox seminary, where he became more interested in forbidden literature than the Bible. It was there that he discovered the revolutionary ideas of Marx and Lenin. Expelled from the seminary, he dedicated himself to clandestine activities, bank robberies to finance the party, organized strikes, and revolutionary propaganda. He was not a great orator, nor did he have the magnetism of Trotsky, but he had something his rivals did not: patience, cunning, and a relentless ability to move in the shadows. He knew how to wait, manipulate, and slowly eliminate all those who stood in his way. After Lenin's death in 1924, Stalin maneuvered with surgical precision. He deceived his comrades, isolated Trotsky, and consolidated a power he would never relinquish. He didn't need to shine. He only needed to survive, and he did that better than anyone. Chapter 3. The Mask of the Father of the Peoples. On the surface, Stalin was portrayed as a paternal leader. Propaganda showed him smiling next to children, happy workers, and grateful peasants. There were statues, songs, and portraits of him in every school and factory. But that was just the mask. In private, he was a suspicious, paranoid, and cruel man. He made ruthless decisions with mathematical coldness. His policy of forced industrialization turned the USSR into a power in record time, yes, but at the cost of millions of lives. peasants were forced to hand over their lands to create collective farms. Anyone who resisted was labeled an enemy of the people and sent to the Gulag. In a few years, tens of thousands of people were deported to Siberia, condemned to work in inhumane conditions. The message was clear. Progress, yes, but built upon corpses. Chapter 4. The Holodomor, the famine in Ukraine. The most heartbreaking case of this policy was Ukraine. Between 1932 and 1933, Stalin ordered massive grain requisitions to export it abroad and finance industrialization. The result was catastrophic. Millions of Ukrainian peasants starved to death in what is now known as the Holodomor. The testimonies are harrowing. Entire families feeding on tree bark, mothers who could not give milk to their children, entire villages reduced to living skeletons. The death toll is chilling. Between 3 and 7 million people perished in that tragedy. But the world did not know immediately. Stalin deployed an impressive propaganda machine. Foreign visitors were shown decorated villages, tables full of food, and smiling peasants. A macabre theater. French deputy Edouard Herriot was one of those who fell for the trap and returned to Europe convinced that Ukraine was prospering. The truth was a silent genocide, a massacre by starvation, Chapter 5. The terror of the purges hunger was not Stalin's only weapon. To consolidate his absolute power, he established a climate of unprecedented terror. During the Great Purges of the 1930s, anyone could be accused of being an enemy of the people. Generals, writers, peasants, priests. The list was endless. The most macabre were the execution quotas. Stalin demanded numbers. So many arrests, so many death sentences. It wasn't about actual culprits, but about numbers to be met. Local officials, desperate to obey, arrested anyone to fill those lists. The trials were public farces where the accused confessed to non-existent crimes under torture, and the sentence was always the same: imprisonment in the Gulag or execution. In Stalin's Soviet Union, it didn't matter if you were loyal, innocent, or even his ally. Everyone was in danger. Chapter 6. The Pact with Hitler. In 1939, the world was stunned when the USSR and Nazi Germany signed the Ribbentrop-Molotov Pact. Two ideological enemies, communism and Nazism, sealed a secret alliance. In the hidden clauses, both agreed to divide Eastern Europe, Poland, Finland, the Baltic states, but it was a pact with the devil. In 1941, Hitler betrayed Stalin and launched Operation Barbarossa, the largest invasion in history. Millions of German soldiers stormed Soviet soil, devastating everything in their path. The USSR was on the brink of collapse. Thousands of cities were destroyed. Millions of civilians died. Stalin, who had blindly trusted Hitler, suddenly found himself cornered. Chapter 7. The Speech That Changed the War. At that critical moment, Stalin made an unexpected decision. He stayed in Moscow. On November 7, 1941, on the anniversary of the Bolshevik Revolution, he gave a historic speech right in Red Square. While German tanks approached, Stalin spoke of resistance, patriotism, and fighting to the end. His words achieved the impossible. A terrified people rose up to defend their land. The resistance in Stalingrad, accompanied by Marshal Zhukov's brilliant strategy, marked the beginning of the Soviet counteroffensive. The Battle of Stalingrad was hell. House-to-house fighting, sub-zero temperatures, hunger, and despair. But the Soviets resisted. When they finally managed to surround and capture the German Sixth Army, over 300,000 Nazi soldiers were taken prisoner. It was Hitler's first major defeat. From then on, Stalin's image changed. He was no longer just the internal dictator. Now he was the leader who defeated the Third Reich. Chapter 8. The False Conqueror. The war ended with the Soviet flag waving in Berlin. Propaganda showed Stalin as the great conqueror, the hero of the century. But in reality, Stalin himself was a man full of fears. He had a phobia of flying, hated crowds, and always traveled in an armored train. In 1945, when he traveled to Potsdam to meet with Churchill and Truman to decide the future of Europe, he did so inside that armored train. There, the new borders were negotiated, and the Cold War began. His personal life, however, was a whirlwind of tragedies. His wife had committed suicide in 1932, his children detested him, and his relationships were marked by violence and resentment. He was a man surrounded by absolute power, but completely alone. Some accounts say that even in his later years, he enjoyed humiliating and tormenting those closest to him, displaying a cruelty that was not limited to the political sphere. Stalin was capable of ruining someone's life with the snap of his fingers, just for amusement. Final chapter. The Tyrant's Legacy. Stalin died in 1953 after suffering a cerebral hemorrhage. His death was followed by a power vacuum and a slow process of de-Stalinization, in which even his own successors denounced his crimes. But the legacy remained. For some, Stalin will always be the man who turned the USSR into a superpower and defeated Nazism. For others, the butcher who sacrificed millions of innocents. The reality is that he was both hero and monster, father and executioner, savior and tyrant. A man who ruled with an iron fist and left behind a country in human ruins, albeit militarily strengthened. Stalin was idolized as a god and remembered as a demon. And his story reminds us that absolute power, when disguised as glory, always demands its price in blood.